Hi, my name is Colin Ryan, and today we're going to look into penetration testing on Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. So how are we going to perform this penetration test? Well, first, we're going to start with some reconnaissance and network enumeration and footprinting. Then we're going to go on to a little vulnerability assessment. Then we're going to exploit the vulnerability, try to gain root access, and then report our findings and offer some remediation techniques. So why is penetration testing important? Well, penetration testing is valuable to an organization because they can use it to test their security policies to see if they're effective. It can also offer solutions for vulnerabilities and weaknesses found, give a risk assessment, make sure they're compliant and meeting regulations, and your organization's reputation is at risk if you were to fall victim to a security attack. So penetration testing will identify these and make sure you can secure and mitigate any possible vulnerabilities. We're going to take a quick look at how to deal with failure. So first, it's okay to fail. If you fail, just make sure to go back, review procedures and best practices, and keep trying. You can also seek help and resources when needed, and consult your peers or experts if it's outside of your scope. And just remember, we learn a lot from failure, so everybody fails. So let's start with identifying our IP address for our Metasploitable 2. So I ran an Nmap scan, and it came back with the IP address 192.168.56.115, and you can see that on the left side in that screenshot. And then once we got that, we could start running our Nmap service scans, intrusive scans, and other things. So I ran the service scan here. We could see it gave us a list of versions and some open ports. And here I ran our Nmap intrusive scan. Just gave us a little more information, see what we can use and maybe exploit from this machine. This is a screenshot of our Nicto scan we ran. So we ran Nicto to see if we can uncover any more vulnerabilities, and listed in the screenshot, you can see there's a lot of things listed here that could be potential vulnerabilities for us to exploit. I also ran an OWASP SAP scan, and we can see this as well listed a bunch of alerts to potential vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit. And our final scan that I ran is on Nessus, and once again it came back with a lot of critical and severe vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit, and listing them in their potential impact. So now we're going to take a look at how I was able to exploit this machine. There's numerous ways to do this, but something that stood out to me when I ran the service scan was port 21 was open, and it listed this version here. So in Kali, we can search exploits, and typing in that version, it actually came up with a backdoor command execution exploit. And so running Metasploit in Kali, which is to the screenshot to the right, I was able to get some info on this exploit. Now it was just as easy as running that exploit with our IP address 192.168.56.115, and we see it was successful, and we are able to obtain the shell. And then to the right, I asked who am I, and I had root access. So this exploit gave us root access right away. And once I had access, I was able to add a user. I used my last name, Ryan, and update a password to create a new user login. In this screenshot here, we're just verifying that everything was correct. So I went to the actual Metasploit 2 program, typed in Ryan, my password, and we can see I was able to log in with that newly created account. So now we're going to do a quick risk assessment on 3 different vulnerabilities. There's more vulnerabilities than 3, but for the purpose of this presentation, we're just going to go over 3 that we identified and tried to remediate. So our first vulnerability was port 21. We have this version running here, and we know there's backdoor access because we just were able to exploit it. So what I did to mitigate this was I actually just closed that port. And we can see down here in my next screenshot, I ran an intrusive scan on it. And instead of that port being open now, it's filtered and does not show the version as well. And here was another vulnerability discovered by Nessus. So our VNC server password was password. So this is a really easy exploit using basic passwords. Anyone can guess and crack this. And so to secure this, we just need to change it with a strong password. So I use my root access to change the password to something complex. And we can see that it's no longer password, so that vulnerability should not be there in our next scan. So here's another vulnerability that our Nessus scan found. So this vulnerability, NFS exported share information disclosure. At least one of the NFS shares exported by the remote server could be mounted by the scanning host. An attacker may be able to leverage this to read and possibly write files on the remote host. So the solution for this is to configure NFS on the remote host so that only authorized hosts can mount its remote shares. Well, when I tried to go into the system with root access and configure authorized users for NFS shares, I was getting denied entry. And so I really didn't know the workaround for this right now. So as a temporary solution, I just used the firewall that was on Metasploit 2, and I just denied NFS altogether and added that rule. And this would be able to secure that. It could cause other services to not respond as well, but this is just a temporary solution. And just one of the last countermeasures I did was I enabled the firewall. When I was able to get in there and get root access, I just started up the firewall, and this should help with some of the traffic filtering. And then as well, another mitigation technique for all this would be to update it completely. A lot of these versions are outdated and can be exploited. The reason I didn't update it is because my virtual machines are all on a host-only network for this lab, and so I did not want to connect it to the internet and update it. And here's our Nessus scan round 2. And as we can see, a lot of those vulnerabilities are actually gone. And this could be due to our implemented changes, just putting on the firewall. But it looks a lot better than our previous scan that we showed in this presentation. So why did I choose to implement these changes? Well, these were quick and easy changes to harden the network. I looked at the scan, saw some of the highest vulnerabilities, and just looked at the solutions, and it was something I could do. It's low cost, low resources to implement, and we want to mitigate some of these highest risk vulnerabilities first, and then we can move on to some of the lower risk vulnerabilities. So my expected results versus actual results. Well, my actual results match what I was expected when I was performing this hardening. A lot of those vulnerabilities disappeared in our next scan. And the only issue I see with this is I messed with some of the firewall settings, and these could affect user services. So this would something that would have to be tested, make sure I'm not disrupting any actual users in it just to protect the network. But as of right now, for vulnerability wise, we did secure the system. These are the lessons I learned when performing network hardening in this lab. So you need to control network traffic. Just by enabling the firewall, we're able to already reduce a lot of the vulnerabilities we saw with open ports. And closing port 21, it completely takes out that exploit that we use to gain root access to the system. Also patching all your versions. So this is very outdated. A lot of the vulnerabilities listed were due to outdated patches. So it's necessary to keep up with your security patches and make sure everything's up to date. You need to manage access. Accounts shouldn't have more privileges than they need to. Set password requirements. Passwords shouldn't be simple, easily guessed. They should have character length, complexity, and also to keep trying and testing. I ran into a lot of issues during this lab, but I kept trying other methods, and eventually I was able to get it. So thank you for listening to this presentation.